From Stockholm, Sweden, this is Democracy Now!
I do not want the president of Brazil to destroy the lungs of our forests, our real Amazon. It is unique. It is a struggle, a fight so we can keep alive, because without the struggle, we won't live. There will be no forest. So we need to fight for it so we can live.
As the Right Livelihood Awards celebrate their 40th anniversary tonight, we speak to one of the four laureates, Davi Kopanawa, indigenous Yanomami leader of Brazil. Then a damning UN report says 7 million children worldwide are deprived of their liberty, from children jailed on the U.S.-Mexico border to the missing children of ISIS fighters. We speak with the report's lead author, Manfred Novak, former UN Special Rapporteur on torture.
Should not be deprived of liberty. And states should look to find non-custodial solutions. And usually they are available. It's simply a question of politics. Whether you invest primarily in the criminal justice system or you invest more in the child welfare system and support the families.
The U.S. is the only country that has not ratified the Convention on the Rights of the Child. All that and more coming up. Welcome to Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, the War and Peace Report. I'm Amy Goodman. The House Intelligence Committee has released its report on the impeachment inquiry, concluding President Trump tried to use the powers of his office to solicit foreign interference on his behalf in the 2020 election. The scathing report says, quote, the president placed his own personal and political interests above the national interests of the United States, unquote. The report went on to say the founding fathers prescribed a remedy for a chief executive who places his personal interests above those of the country. Impeachment, unquote. This is House Intelligence Committee Chair Adam Schiff speaking Tuesday.
If the Congress allows a president to so fully and blanketly obstruct the work of Congress, even involving an impeachment investigation into the president's own misconduct, then we are begging for more of the same. We are signaling to any future president they can engage in whatever corruption, malfeasance, or negligence, and they are beyond accountability.
The report centers on how President Trump withheld military aid from Ukraine in order to pressure the Ukrainian president to investigate Trump's political rivals, the Bidens. The report also chronicles how top administration officials knew about Trump's efforts or helped him carry them out. These top officials include Vice President Mike Pence, Secretary of State Mike Pompeo, former Energy Secretary Rick Perry, and Acting Chief of Staff Mick Mulvaney. Today, the House Judiciary Committee will hold its first televised hearing featuring testimony from 4 law experts on the constitutional nature of impeachment. Democracy Now! Will be live streaming today's impeachment hearing beginning at 10 a.m. Eastern Time at democracynow.org. The European Union Environmental Agency is warning wide swaths of Europe could face annual extreme heat waves unless urgent action is taken to dramatically reduce greenhouse gas emissions to avert the most catastrophic impacts of climate change. This is Hans Bruynix of the European Union Environmental Agency, which released its new report this week amidst the UN Climate Change Summit in Madrid, Spain.
Things are indeed urgent. We need to bend the trends in the next decade. It's a critical decade. We already see irreversible damage. Climate change is happening. Biodiversity is lost. Species are disappearing. Our oceans are changing fundamentally.
Democracy Now! Will be broadcasting from COP25 in Madrid, Spain, beginning on Friday and all next week. California Senator Kamala Harris says she's ending her 2020 presidential campaign. Harris began the race as one of the front-running candidates, but now says she doesn't have enough money to continue her run. There's been a significant racial wealth gap among the 2020 presidential candidates. In November, the four leading white candidates, Bernie Sanders, Elizabeth Warren, Pete Buttigieg, and Joe Biden had nearly 4 times as much cash on hand as the race's 5 candidates of color: Harris, Andrew Yang, Cory Booker, Tulsi Gabbard, and Julian Castro. This is Castro responding to news about Kamala Harris's departure from the race.
What we're staring at is a DNC debate stage in a few days with no people of color on it. That does not reflect the diversity of our party or of our country. And we need to do better than that.
After Senator Harris announced her departure from the race, Trump sarcastically tweeted at Harris, writing, quote, "Too bad, we will miss you, Kamala." In response, Harris, California's former top prosecutor, responded, "Don't worry, Mr. President. I'll see you at your trial." An explosive new ProPublica investigation reveals how the consulting giant McKinsey & Company helped the Trump administration speed up its mass deportation program. McKinsey proposed cuts to spending on food, medical care, and supervision of people in immigration jails, measures that were considered too harsh by some immigration and customs enforcement agents. The McKinsey team also looked for ways to accelerate deportations, which raised concerns among some ICE officials about due process protections for immigrants appealing their removal from the United States. McKinsey now has a new $2 million contract with CBP, that's Customs and Border Protection. In Louisiana, asylum seekers detained at an immigrant jail in the rural town of Winfield are refusing to move into their cells as part of an ongoing protest against their prolonged detention. Family members of people detained at the Wynn Correctional Center say some asylum seekers are sleeping outside the facility and have inscribed towels and bed sheets with the word libertad, or freedom, in Spanish. Wynn detains about 1,500 men and is one of 8 jails in Louisiana that began imprisoning asylum seekers last year. The House of Representatives has overwhelmingly voted for legislation that requires President Trump to impose sanctions against senior Chinese officials involved in the mass detention camps of Muslim Uyghurs in China's northwestern region of Xinjiang. The Chinese government responded angrily to the legislation's passage. This is the Chinese Foreign Ministry spokesperson.
No person should underestimate the Chinese government's resolution and ability to defend our national sovereignty, national security, and developmental interests. Anyone who wants to use Hong Kong and Xinjiang issues to interfere and restrain China's development must be delusional.
The House's passage of the Uyghur Act of 2019 comes as the New York Times reports Chinese officials in Xinjiang are collecting blood samples en masse in efforts to build a system capable of creating an image of a person's face using DNA. The United States is also separately seeking to develop this technology, which raises vast concerns about privacy and state surveillance. The International Criminal Courts are beginning a 3-day hearing today about torture in Afghanistan, including by U.S. forces. The hearing will probe allegations that members of the U.S. military and intelligence agencies tortured, raped, and sexually abused Afghan prisoners between 2003 and 2004. Prosecutors and torture survivors are hoping to overturn a previous ruling that blocked an investigation into alleged U.S. war crimes in Afghanistan. This ruling, issued in April, came only a month after U.S. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo banned visas for International Criminal Court staff seeking to investigate the allegations of U.S. war crimes in Afghanistan and beyond. In New York City, 4 Rikers Island correctional officers have been suspended after video showed the officers stood by for 7 minutes while a teenager attempted to hang himself. Video shows one officer even walked up to the holding pen where the teenager was hanging, opened the door, then closed the door, and walked away without intervening. 18-year-old Nicholas Feliciano had been jailed in Rikers since November 19th when he was arrested on a parole violation. He's now hospitalized in a medically induced coma after the suicide attempt. And today marks the 50th anniversary of the death of Black Panther leader Fred Hampton. On December 4th, 1969, Chicago police raided Hampton's apartment and shot and killed him in his bed. He was just 21 years old. Black Panther leader Mark Clark was also killed by the police in the raid. Authorities initially claimed the Panthers had opened fire on the police, who were there to serve a search warrant for weapons, but evidence later emerged that told a very different story. The FBI, the Cook County State's Attorney's Office, and Chicago police had conspired to assassinate Fred Hampton. This is Hampton, in his own words, speaking before his death about the repression against his fellow Black Panther Party members.
Bobby Seale is going through all types of physical and mental torture. But that's all right, because we said even before this happened, and we're going to say it after this, and after I'm locked up, and after everybody's locked up, that you can jail revolutionaries, but you can't jail a revolution. Right. You might run a liberator like Harris Cleave out the country, but you can't run liberation out the country. You might murder a freedom.
That was Fred Hampton. Fred Hampton speaking in the 1969 documentary, The Murder of Fred Hampton, produced by the Chicago Film Group. Fred Hampton and Mark Clark were assassinated by the FBI and Chicago police 50 years ago today. And those are some of the headlines. This is Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, The War and Peace Report. I'm Amy Goodman. We're broadcasting from Stockholm, Sweden, where the Right Livelihood Awards are marking their 40th anniversary. The Right Livelihood Award was established in 1980 to honor and support those offering practical and exemplary answers to the most urgent challenges facing us today. It's since become known as the Alternative Nobel Prize. Over the past 4 decades, it's been given to activists and grassroots leaders around the globe, a number of whom have gone on to win the Nobel Peace Prize. This year's winners are the 16-year-old Swedish climate activist Greta Thunberg, the Sahrawi human rights leader Aminatou Haidar, who's been challenging the Moroccan occupation of Western Sahara for decades, Chinese women's rights lawyer Guo Jianmei, and Brazilian indigenous leader Davi Kopanawa and the Yanomami Hutukara Association. Their fight for the Amazon's biodiversity and indigenous people will hear Davi Kopanawa describe later in the broadcast. But first, we're joined in our studio by Ole Vanukskil, Executive Director of the Right Livelihood Foundation, based here in Stockholm. Welcome to Democracy Now!, Ole. It's great to have you with us. Congratulations on this 40th anniversary.
Thank you.
Can you talk about how these awards got started and why they're here in Stockholm?
Yeah, this is now 40 years ago. It was during the days that John Lennon was shot dead in the streets of New York that the foundation started here with its very first award presentation. Now we've been doing this for so many years now, 178 laureates from 70 countries. Now, the first idea was really linked to the Nobel Foundation, which is a foundation based here in Stockholm, because they are responsible to carry out the will of Alfred Nobel. And the will of Alfred Nobel said that his capital should be used to start these 5 Nobel Prizes. And then the Nobel Foundation started a 6th Nobel Prize, the Prize in Economics, in 1969. And from that emerged the idea, and it was my uncle at the time, Jakob von Uexküll, to think, if you can start new Nobel categories, it shouldn't just be a one in economics. There should be a Nobel Prize, which is still the world's most important award, also for people who work for the environment and for the interest of the poor majority in the world.
So you have had this award for sustainability and equality. And will the Nobel Foundation consider adding it as another Nobel Prize?
They took a decision then in 1980 when my uncle made this offer to not take on any new categories any longer, but it didn't need the blessing of the Nobel Foundation, and so he went on to start the Right Livelihood Foundation. But because of this history, it's still referred to as the Alternative Nobel here in Sweden.
And right livelihood means?
It's the idea of living lightly on the earth, of not taking more than a fair share of the resources, and it means to bring change into the world through your practical actions. We call our laureates practical visionaries, people who are working towards a vision of how the world could be so different, but who show with their concrete work what the steps on this way can be, who prove that solutions are possible.
This year, 2 of the 4 Right Livelihood laureates are not here for different reasons. You have Greta Thunberg, who's actually from Stockholm, but she's just made landfall in Portugal, heading to Spain for the UN Climate Summit, tries to minimize her carbon footprint. And then you have the Chinese lawyer. Explain why she has not come.
She could not travel from China to attend the award presentation here in Stockholm. It's a sign of the shrinking space for civil society around the world. We've seen that in recent years with laureates from other countries as well. We're in constant contact with her, and we've agreed that we're not commenting on the exact reasons. The good thing about our relationship with our laureates is that it doesn't end with the award presentation. Rather the opposite. We have an ongoing cooperation with many of our laureates, and we hope that there'll be other opportunities to meet Guo Jianmei.
One of those who will be appearing tonight, not in person but by Skype, is Edward Snowden, who is in political exile right now in Moscow, Russia. I'll be interviewing him from the stage. And others have gone on to win the Nobel Peace Prize, like Mangare Maathai, the great environmentalist.
Indeed, we see that this award is an enormous support for the laureates. The support takes very different shapes. We have some like Greta Thunberg who have enormous worldwide attention already. We have others who are really, through this award for the first time, catapulted onto a world stage. And for all of them, through our office in Stockholm, but also through our office in Geneva, where we have consultative status with the United Nations, we continue the cooperation.
Aminatou Haidar, who we just interviewed last night and will be broadcasting on Democracy Now!, the Sahrawi leader who has opposed Moroccan occupation of Western Sahara, is one of those who will be awarded tonight, and the other, Davi Kapanawa.
Indeed, and both of them are here, and this is an example where, for Aminatou Haidar, for instance, the conflict in Western Sahara has been neglected for far too long, and the neglect of not just the international community, but also, unfortunately, we have to say, the press, communicates that if you protest violently, then you have the world's attention. But if you protest in a non-violent way, as Aminatou and the people of West Sahara have been doing, then nobody really cares. And we really hope to shine a light on this, what is called a frozen conflict, but where there's suffering going on every day.
Well, we're going to play now the words of Davi Kapanawa, the 4th Right Livelihood winner, the laureate tonight. And I want to thank you, Ole van Luxkil, for joining us today, Executive Director of the Right Livelihood Foundation based here in Stockholm. As we turn to this indigenous leader in his own words, last night I sat down with Davi Kapanawa, who is a Right Livelihood laureate, along with his organization, Hutukara Yanomami Association. Kapanawa is a shaman of the Yanomami people, one of the largest indigenous tribes in Brazil, dedicating his life to preserving his culture and protecting the Amazon rainforest. I began by asking him to talk about the threats facing the Yanomami people.
My name is Davi Kapanawa Yanomami. I am a representative of the Yanomami people in Roraima and Amazonas states in Brazil. My people, the Yanomami, is a sacred people.
Até hoje, o não indígena não
Up until today, the non-indigenous peoples haven't recognized where we come from, where we were born, and that is why the non-indigenous society is always messing up with our homes, destroying our land, our territory, contaminating our rivers, killing our fish. And hindering the health of the Yanomami people, who are now contaminated by men who came and contaminated our home.
The recent election of Jair Bolsonaro as the president of Brazil, how has that affected indigenous people?
President Bolsonaro was elected by his own people. Us, indigenous peoples, we haven't participated in it. We have not voted for him, but he's now there.
Está querendo não, ele já está preparando.
And he's preparing a trap.
Armadilha para meu povo.
He's preparing a trap for my Yanomami people in order to fool us and manipulate us.
Explain more what that trap is.
Então, a armadilha é como se pega onça.
It is a trap, just like the one you use to hunt an onça, Brazilian jaguar, or a snake when they're sleeping at their homes. Men prepare a trap to get the animal.
Para maltratar.
So it is a trap to mistreat us. He threatens us
Deixar doente meu povo.
to make my people fall ill, to make our children fall ill and get diseases. That's what I mean by trap.
E ele sempre usa.
That's the trap he always uses to any kind of indigenous people
A Terra planeta.
and the planet Earth.
Can you explain Bolsonaro's latest moves trying to get a law passed that would allow for more gold mining and what that means for the Yanomami and other indigenous people?
Fazer pensamento dele é
Before he was able to become a president, he already has this thought, this intention of reducing the size of our land. He says it is too much land for just a few indigenous peoples, and it is a land very rich in minerals, in wood. He says that the land is good for plants such as crops of soybeans or sugarcane.
Planta que eles que planta para.
They want to use the land to plant things that they use for food, food for the city. That's his reasoning. He wants to extract things from the underground. That's his concern. He wants to extract the wealth from the earth, right from the land where Yanomami people have been living for many, many years. That's why he keeps talking about it. He created a legislation.
Lei mineração.
It is a bill for mining, and he wants to get it approved at our National Congress.
Eu tô assim sabendo que vai.
And I am aware of it.
Deixar acontecer isso.
I know that if they let it happen, this is really a worry for me.
Mercury, what's used in the gold mining process, how does it make people sick?
Bom, eu vou explicar.
I'm going to explain it to you. This mercury that they use
vem buscar no outro lugar.
They use it when they actually get it from somewhere else, from Japan or from here in Europe, and then they use it in their mining activities. The machines come to dig a huge hole to extract minerals, and then it goes on the rivers. The rivers are full of minerals, full of gold, full of sand and mud. The mercury is then dropped on the rivers, and they use it to separate mud and sand, so that the only thing left behind is gold. That's what they use it for. And the mercury is then left inside of the river. It won't melt like sugar does. It stays there. It is a disease that stays within our rivers. And then fish come and eat smaller fish, just like fruits that fall into the rivers, and then fish get contaminated. And us, Yanomami, who live by the rivers, we use the water to make food or to bathe in it and to drink it. And after, we get sick. We get cancer. And our children then born smaller than usual, underdeveloped. That's what mercury is causing. Our health is terrible in Yanomami people because of it.
That's Brazilian indigenous leader Davi Kopanawa, co-founder of the Hutucari Yanomami Association. He'll receive the Right Livelihood Award tonight here in Stockholm, Sweden. We'll continue with our conversation with Davi in a minute. Someone for Something by the Swedish musician and flautist Elsa Nielsen. This is Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, the War and Peace Report. In our next segment, we'll be speaking with the former UN Rapporteur on Torture, Manfred Novak, about the new study on the imprisonment of children around the world. But first, we continue our conversation with Davi Kopanawa, Yanomami indigenous leader in Brazil, receiving the Right Livelihood Award tonight here in Stockholm, Sweden. Davi, I wanted to read a few of Bolsonaro's quotes. In 1998, he said, "It's a shame that the Brazilian cavalry hasn't been as efficient as the Americans who exterminated the Indians."
The President of the United States, they exterminated our indigenous peoples who lived over there. He's doing just the same. He's repeating it. He wants to kill my people. He wants to get rid of the forest. He wants to destroy our health. That's the role he's playing. That's a law that came from the United States, and the Brazilian government is using it as a copy, like you call it.
I wanted to read another quote from a few years ago, 2015. Bolsonaro said, "The Indians do not speak our language. They do not have money. They do not have culture. They are native peoples. How do they manage to get 13% of the national territory?" And he said, "There is no indigenous territory where there aren't minerals, gold, tin, magnesium are in these lands, especially in the Amazon, the richest area in the world. I'm not getting into this nonsense of defending land for Indians, Bolsonaro said. If you could comment.
Ele ouviu falar outra pessoa.
He heard other people talking.
É por isso que ele falou que nós,
and that's why he says that us Yanomami people do not speak Portuguese. Of course, we don't speak Portuguese because we're not from Portugal.
Nós somos Yanomami.
We are Yanomami from Brazil.
Nós temos própria nossa língua.
We have our own language.
Yanomami.
It exists. It is Yanomami.
Yanomami não precisa de dinheiro.
Yanomami do not need any money.
Yanomami não pode, assim, não precisa de dinheiro.
Yanomami do not need money to go on and steal from others, to steal from friends, from your own relatives and brothers. We don't need that.
É pensamento diferente.
Yanomami has a different way of thinking.
É por isso que ele leu contra nós.
He read things
contra
against
nós,
us.
Porque
he has read
ele perdeu
things because
ele perdeu quando nós ganhamos.
He lost when we had our victory.
As nossas terras,
when we were able to have again, to get back for us our land that had been stolen from us, and that's why he talks against us and he speaks these bad things about us. And I defend myself and my people on behalf of my people. I defend the name of my people and our language. What's the use for the Yanomami to speak Portuguese? We're not interested in it. We're interested in our own language, our knowledge, the knowledge of our people who uses its own language. That's what's interesting for us. But I wanted to respond to the second thing that you read about, his words when he speaks of our wealth. Of course, there's a lot of wealth. Brazil is very rich. Our country, Brazil, is very rich in good land, in forests, rich in mountains and waters.
Que a gente usa remédio,
medicine,
natural,
the natural medicines that we use, and beautiful places.
Esse é que nós somos ricos.
That's where we're rich in.
Nós, Yanomami que mora lá,
us Yanomami who live there,
nunca passou fome,
who have never experienced hunger. Before people who came to invade our land, to invade Brazil, when they first met us, we were healthy. They found us healthy with lots of food, banana, manioc, sugar cane, palm heart, cará fruit, and all the fruits you find in the forest, animals, game that we hunt, tapir, fish, everything. That's what we're rich in. It's not the kind of wealth that you need to dig a hole in the earth to find it, to destroy the land. Our people is different. That's why he speaks against us. And I don't want to say bad things about him, but he attacked us, so I will attack him. I am not going to attack him with a bow and arrow. However, I am going to fight using my mouth and paper. He uses words, and the word that you use, which is prejudice. He doesn't like indigenous peoples. He does not want to let the Yanomami people to live at peace protected. He does not want that. He doesn't want to let it happen. What he wants is to extract our wealth to send to other countries. The wealth of our Yanomami land, he will take it and send it to China, to Japan, to Germany, and other places. That's his way of thinking. That's his concern, making money, earning money, so that he can become rich. And when he becomes rich, and when he dies, he won't take any of it with it, not even his underwear.
Bolsonaro calls the climate crisis a hoax. President Trump calls the climate crisis a hoax. Can you talk about what the climate crisis means for the Yanomami people, for the people of Brazil?
They're a sick group. The President of the United States, the President of Brazil, and the President of Venezuela. They are talking to each other and discussing, and then they tell people there are no problems in Brazil because they want to hide it. This is very clear. Everyone knows it's taking place, climate change. He sees the fire burning up our forests, but he's not concerned about it. He's not worried when he sees the forest burning up. He's taking advantage of it. Because the fire burns up the forest and the trees burn up, and then workers come and take advantage of it and bring trees down. Yeah, that's his way of thinking. But it truly took place. It's happening. Wildfires in the forest and deforestation are increasing.
Can you talk about the murder of Paulo Paulino Guajajara, the indigenous forest protector? Your organization has worked with him for some time. Recently, a group of experts released an open letter to Bolsonaro warning a genocide is underway against the indigenous tribes of the Amazon rainforest. Do you feel threatened yourself and respond to that murder?
Well, I am a leader who fights. I've been fighting for 40 years, and I am threatened. I am threatened by a group of illegal gold miners and also farmers and politicians. Politicians have a way of finding someone who enjoys killing and who kills indigenous peoples. And I am persecuted. Our indigenous leaders who really fight, they want to get rid of us. So I am threatened. And I think that this will happen again. We have talked about his name, Bolsonaro. He will know that we are talking about him, about his name, Bolsonaro. So I am asking your help in order to protect us so that we won't let it happen again as it happened to other leaders who got murdered.
lutando muito perigoso.
It is a very dangerous struggle. In Boa Vista, well, it is a small town.
Os Bolsonaro,
so the Bolsonaro people, they pay others to go after the leaders who are fighting.
What message do you have for the leaders of the UN Climate Summit, the thousands of people who come from around the world? And what message do you have to the people of the world?
Então, eu gostaria
Well, I would like
to
give a message from the Yanomami people. I would like to ask the leaders, the non-indigenous leaders from here, together with other leaders from who are at their homes, their cities, their capitals. I would like to take this opportunity to send them a message so that they can know about what's going on, so they won't let it happen again, something very bad to my Yanomami people, so that they won't let people destroy the environment, so that they won't let people destroy the lungs of planet Earth. That's my message to everyone, all of those who fight, all of those who love the forest, all of those who like to protect, to take care of nature for their children, grandchildren, and the other generations. I also need help. I need help on that. Because we have grandchildren. So that they have their protected land. So that they have a protected land for them. That is why I'm giving you this message, to ask for your strength, your European people, to talk to Bolsonaro, to talk to the president of Brazil, so that he takes care of his country, so that he can take care of it. Protecting it together with the indigenous peoples and together with the people who live in sacred lands. And also the Yanomami peoples who have never seen the white man, uncontacted Yanomami people who live in sacred land. So I would like you to protect us, protect the isolated indigenous communities. I do not want the president of Brazil to destroy the lungs of our forests, our real Amazon. It is unique. Lots of people are trying to get their hands on the Amazon, just like bees who collect honey and take it to their homes. I do not want to let him do just the same. That's my message. This is a message for women who fight for having the right to land, men who fight for their forests, their education, their health. Nowadays, the young people, the youth, is fighting, and that's they are the ones who will keep on fighting. It is a struggle, a fight, so we can keep alive, because without the struggle, we won't live. There will be no forest. So we need to fight for it so we can live.
And what does the Right Livelihood Award mean to you? Why you're here in Stockholm, Sweden?
I think this award is really important. It is very interesting that the government of Sweden invented this and created this award. This award is important to bring recognition to my struggle, to bring recognition to my Yanomami people, so that the people from the city and the people of the planet get to know us. This is really important that the people from here are offering me this award. I never asked for it. You offered it, and I am happy to accept it. It is really important. It is the result of our fight.
Brazilian indigenous leader Davi Kapanawa, co-founder of the Hutucara Yanomami Association. He'll receive the Right Livelihood Award tonight, along with the 16-year-old Swedish climate activist Greta Thunberg, Sahrawi human rights leader Aminatou Haidar, and Chinese women's rights lawyer Guo Junmei. When we return, we speak to the former UN Special Rapporteur on Torture, who just released a devastating report on the more than 7 million children worldwide deprived of their liberty, from immigration jails to orphanages to prisons. Stay with us.
Hoy empieza mi tristeza, ya te vas, empacada en tus maletas. Mi alegría te llevarás. Como te amo no había amado ni amaré. Y poquitito más que nada sin ti seré. Seré como un sol apagado. Que en tinieblas para siempre viviré. Hoy empieza mi tristeza, ya te vas, empacada en tus maletas, mi alegría te llevarás. Como te amo no había amado ni amaré. Y poquitito más.
Today begins My Sadness by Johann Sebastian. This is Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, The War and Peace Report. I'm Amy Goodman. We're broadcasting from Stockholm, Sweden. As we end today's show with a damning UN report that says 7 million children worldwide are deprived of their liberty, from children detained on the U.S.-Mexico border to the missing children of ISIS fighters. The global study on children deprived of liberty reports that millions of children are living in various states of detention across the globe, from orphanages and foster homes to police custody and immigration detention. Among them, at least 410,000 are detained in jails and prisons, where violence is, quote, endemic. The study also found the number of children detained in the context of armed conflict dramatically has risen. The global study was published in November on the 30th anniversary of the Convention on the Rights of the Child, the landmark international treaty affirming the world's commitment to protecting children. It is the most ratified UN treaty in history. The United States is the only country that has not ratified the convention. We're joined now by the lead author of the UN report on children, Manfred Novak. He is an Austrian human rights lawyer, serves as the Secretary General of the Global Campus of Human Rights based in Venice, Italy, and he's also the former UN Special Rapporteur on torture. We welcome you to Democracy Now! It's great to have you with us, Manfred. If you can summarize the results of this devastating report.
As you said already, it's more than 7 million children that are deprived of liberty, most of them in all kinds of institutions, but also in the administration of justice, in migration detention. And every of this child is too much, because the Convention on the Rights of the Child is very clear. It says deprivation of liberty of children shall only be allowed as a measure of last resort. So it means that we have to do much more. States primarily have to do much more in order to reduce those children by means of diversion, by stopping immigration detention, because it is never a measure of last resort. It always violates the Convention, but also to establish special children courts to apply diversion measures, because we need much more resources to support families, foster families, but also child welfare systems. They should take with children even if they are in conflict with the law.
So you talked about detention and how that violates the international treaties on the Convention on Child. The U.S., let's start there, is the only country in the world that has not ratified this convention.
Yes.
Explain the convention.
The convention is now 30 years old. It entails all kinds of rights, in particular also every decision that affects children should take into account the best interests of the child. Children should participate in every decision that is directly affecting them. There should be no discrimination against children. There should not be violence, whether sexual violence, etc., but also, in principle, no deprivation of liberty. On the other hand, children should be supported in the right to education, healthcare, etc. It's a very comprehensive treaty that really takes into account the most basic needs of children.
Is not honoring.
Yes.
So you talked about detention on the border. The number of children that are detained, that are separated by their families in this country, and you talking about an international violation of law.
Yes, of course, this was, in my opinion, a decision that is inhuman treatment, both to the children and very small children that were separated from their families, but also to the families. And now sometimes the families have been deported back to Mexico or Central America, and the children are still kept in the United States. The children don't know where their families are. The families are searching for the children. This is terrible if you imagine if you are a mother of a small child and you don't know where the child is.
Also, the children of ISIS fighters. Explain where they're being imprisoned.
We have about 29,000 of these children. Partly they were recruited via the internet by ISIS. Partly whole families went to the so-called caliphate, and it's small children, or they were even born there. And now they are detained either by the Kurdish authorities in the north of Syria or in Iraq under deplorable conditions. And very often European or other countries where they are coming from don't want to take them back. So what we are saying and recommending is that European and Central Asian and other states should take the responsibility for their own nationals to actually take them back and try to re-socialize them, not to punish them. Children in armed conflict, child soldiers, should be seen primarily as victims, but not as perpetrators.
Talk about Uyghur children. Talk about what's happening in China right now.
I mean, what we know is that about 1 million human beings, Uyghurs, Muslims from Xinjiang in China, are currently detained in camps for re-education purposes. And of course, many of them are children, and also children have been separated from their parents. But we don't have enough information to really say how many, but certainly those are thousands, many thousands of children that are suffering there.
So what does it mean when a state doesn't participate in giving over information?
Of course, we sent out a question to all member states of the United Nations, and we had a fairly good response. But of course, certain states, including China and the United States of America, did not reply to our questionnaire. So we had to rely on other official data, and that's why also our estimates are very conservative. If I'm speaking about 410,000 children in jails and prisons, it's a very conservative estimate. Probably the real number is much higher.
I wanted to ask you about a story that goes back in time, but actually is in the headlines right now. And it's about this latest news that we had in our headlines about the International Criminal Court finding the U.S. Looking into crimes against humanity or war crimes. And, I mean, when you were the UN rapporteur on torture, you called for an investigation into President Bush and Donald Rumsfeld for war crimes. This relates directly.
Yes, for war crimes and crimes against humanity, for me, I was special rapporteur on torture, for torture that was practiced, both in secret detention camps, in Guantanamo Bay, in Abu Ghraib, and in other facilities, in particular also in Afghanistan, the prison of darkness, etc., which were terrible crimes that were committed there under the direct responsibility of President Bush and, of course, Secretary Rumsfeld as well. So I am very happy, actually. It's a little bit late that the International Criminal Court only now is starting to investigate these crimes that happened in Afghanistan many, many years ago.
I was struck by how little attention this latest report that you've put out has gotten when you're talking about 7 million children, and it could well be more children being detained, imprisoned, held in some way around the world. Some of the media tried to discredit it based on the news conference that you held, talking about a number you used, and I'm wondering if you could comment quickly on this, talking about the number of children in detention in the United States in immigration detention.
Yes, that was a number that dated back to 2015, still under the Obama administration. But it was the latest reliable number that we had on the total number per annum that are detained in migration detention in the United States. Currently, the latest figures that we have are 76,000 in 2019, so it's not that much a difference. And the U.S. is still the country with the highest number of children held in migration detention worldwide.
And so what you're saying is there's been a continuum from the Obama to the Trump administration.
Of course,
yes. Finally, the legacy of the torture program of the United States, you having served for years as the UN rapporteur on torture.
Of course, it was a very bad precedent, and in many other countries who said the United States is the country that founded democracy and human rights more than 200 years ago, they are now officially applying torture. So why shouldn't we do the same? Because we are also dealing with terrorists, and so that is really undermining the absolute prohibition of torture, and that's a very, very negative long-term effect of the Bush administration.
Well, we will certainly link to your report on the imprisonment of children worldwide. Your figures, the new global study on children detained, deprived of liberty. Your number, at least 7 million. Manfred Novak, Austrian human rights lawyer, former UN rapporteur on torture from 2004 to 2010. When we will be live streaming today's impeachment hearing at democracynow.org, starting at 10 Eastern Standard Time. That does it for our show. Special thanks to Stockholm's Open Channel, Stockholm's only independent grassroots non-commercial TV station committed to free speech. I'm Amy Goodman. Thanks so much for joining us.